Yeah.
Yeah. And is the changing of the slides working?
Yep, it's working. All yours.
Okay, great. Because yeah, as I said, we had some trouble with this last time on another Zoom call I've had. But yeah, so thanks again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are in the world. My name is Peter Lange. I'm an independent consultant, and yeah, I noticed in the agenda that went out. The title of my presentation was actually not what it is. It was something like lack of reliable data from Somalia. That is one aspect of my presentation here as well. But I'm going to talk to you a bit more broadly about, as Mohammed mentioned, about a recent World Bank study that I've been involved in. On critical information infrastructure, or CII, in Somalia. But the lack of data and the lack of cooperation we experienced from some of the industry in providing information to us for this study is one aspect of that I'll also touch upon. Let's go through this. What is CII, Critical Information Infrastructure? The definition is on the screen there. Information and communication infrastructures and assets essential for the maintenance of vital societal functions within and across sectors. Now, this study that I was involved in had two components. I was looking after component one, physical infrastructure. So that's physical connectivity infrastructure, the towers, fiber optic cables, microwave links, and so on. And another consultant, another analyst was looking at component two, which was termed logical/virtual infrastructure, which is, as it says here, systems, hardware, and software that provide certain functions and services, for example, interconnection, data storage, cybersecurity, and among others. And this logical virtual infrastructure operates on top of the physical infrastructure to support an ecosystem of feature-rich, reliable, and secure applications and services. For example, mobile money. Mobile money was a key focus area of the component two of the study, but of course this infrastructure is important for many other services as well that rely on this infrastructure. So in terms of physical infrastructure, there are three distinct layers of that that we looked at one by one. The international connections is the first layer, so that's the international submarine cables, the fiber optic cables that come into the country, and also terrestrial cross-border links. The second layer is the domestic backbone network. So this is within the country. Again, fiber optic connections, terrestrial ones within the country, or microwave point-to-point links. And then the third layer is the local access network. And that primarily, like in many African countries, in Somalia, also the mobile networks play the key role here. It's the primary method of access for most users. Fixed access, fixed line-based access is relatively small. So this would be the traditional copper lines, of which there isn't much in Somalia. And of course, more recently, fiber also has been rolled out in this local layer of the network, fiber to the home, fiber to the premises, different flavors of that, FTTX, and fixed wireless as an interim substitute, maybe, where there isn't fiber yet, through a fixed wireless link. But this is relatively small compared to the mobile network access. It's also because it's relatively expensive also. It takes longer to implement fixed line access. So it's mostly the corporate sector uses this, the direct fiber connections, for access, the corporate sector, embassies, government, NGOs, and so on. I'll take you through the three layers one by one. So let's look at the international layer first, the international submarine cables. Here, the situation isn't good and hasn't been good, but the good news is it will actually improve dramatically very soon with new cables coming in. So a quick review here of what we have and what we've had. This is the first cable that landed in Somalia, the EASY cable, which stands for the East African Submarine System. That landed in Mogadishu in 2014. The rest of the cable had already been live earlier than that in 2010 in these other countries that you see on the map. But because of the piracy issue in Somali waters, the landing in Somalia was delayed by several years to 2014. But since 2014, Mogadishu has been connected to the big wide world out there through this fiber optic cable for the first time. The problem with that has been that this has been the only cable for quite a few years. And so whenever something happens, something goes wrong, there's a failure, an outage, of which there have been a few, they are catastrophic. You have probably all heard or experienced firsthand the major outage in 2017, where the whole country was plunged into darkness, so to speak, internet-wise, for I think it was 24 days, because there was a fiber cut of some ship's anchor, cut the cable here that branched to Mogadishu, and it took that long to repair. And there's no backup. There's no second cable that one can switch over to. But as I said, that will improve shortly. There was another outage recently in 2020 in July, not as dramatic, not as long. But again, the cost is always substantial to the operator to repair the damage and the revenue loss in the meantime. And the big outage in 2017 has been estimated that the cost to the Somali economy as a whole was estimated at $10 million per day. In 2017, a second cable landed in the north, the G2A cable, which stands for Gulf to Africa. So this cable comes from Oman, and well, it was supposed to connect those two major cities in the north, Bosaso and Berbera. The Berbera connection, as we found out through this study, hasn't been fully implemented yet. There was a dispute about the landing rights of this cable, and a dispute about an exclusive fiber network license that was given to one company in Somaliland, Somcable. So this has prevented the landing and the implementation of the cable in Berbera. So it's really only operational in Bosaso for now. And but over the next few years, there are going to be 3 more cables coming online. They have interesting names such as DARE, Peace, and To Africa, different initiatives, different companies behind it, consortia. So this is what we're going to have by 2023, inshallah, if all goes well. Quite a network of 5 cables landing in Somalia, and not only Mogadishu and Bosaso, but other places as well, Kismayo in the south and Hobyo in the middle there. And Mogadishu will, by 2023, have gone from having just a single cable landing, the EASY cable, to having 4. And Bosaso will have 3 instead of now just 1. And that is really good news when it comes to these major disruptions from fiber cuts or other outages. as soon as you have a second or even third and fourth cable landing in a city, you then have options, backup options. You have backup from other cables. And the outage, there may be a short one when the cut occurs, but you can switch over to an alternative cable. And that is currently not the case. So that or I should have said, so these new submarine cables, if I go back to this slide, some of them, the DARE cable, which will come online very shortly this year or even still or early next year, will for the first time connect the north and the south of Somalia, which we haven't got on the second level, the second layer of infrastructure that I'm going to talk about, the terrestrial domestic backbone network. If we look at this map, you'll see here what we have currently in terms of terrestrial fiber optic infrastructure. And you can see that's incomplete. So there are big gaping gaps here. Most prominent, so let's start in the north maybe. There's a relatively well established fiber optic backbone network in Somaliland. Here there's also a terrestrial international fiber crossing from Djibouti. So that's where Somaliland gets its international internet bandwidth from Djibouti, in the absence of a submarine cable landing in the territory. And then the company I mentioned earlier, Somcable, has built quite an extensive backbone network in Somaliland. You can see here even having formed some ring structures already. These ring structures here. Ring structures are always good because they provide redundancy, which means if a fiber cut occurs, which happens frequently, due to construction activities, digging going on in the streets, fiber can be damaged. If you have a ring structure, the effect is not so dramatic. You can, in most cases, you can still route your traffic to its destination the other way around the ring or via another route in an extensive network like that. But as you can see here, can you see my mouse moving, by the way, on the screen as well? My mouse pointer?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So as you can see here, this network that I just talked about in Somaliland is disconnected from the rest of the country. So there is a gap here in that in the border region between Somaliland and Puntland because of the border conflict between those two parts of the country. So the fiber does not connect to the rest of the country. In Puntland itself, as I mentioned, we have the G2A submarine cable landing in Bosaso up here. And Golis, the regional operator in Puntland, has rolled out a fiber route going south. And they made some progress in the last few years. We did a similar study 4 years ago in 2016. And by that time, the fiber was still up here somewhere. It hadn't even reached Garowe at the time. They've passed Garowe, the regional capital. They've gone as far as Galkayo here in the south, and from there, Golis' sister company Hormud has taken over and is driving this fiber further south. This is as far as they've got at this stage, near around Dusam Reb. And that's, from what we found in this study, that's probably how it's going to stay for some time, because this whole region here between Mogadishu and Dusam Reb, this is an area where there is an Al-Shabaab presence and there is insecurity there, which does not allow for safe deployment in the first place and then operation of terrestrial fiber optic networks. So that may not happen for some time, that this connection, this north-south connection, is closed. As you can see, there is some local fiber in Mogadishu and going out of Mogadishu a little bit to Afgoye and some other towns, but There's not much there at all. And really the whole southern part of the country is pretty much devoid of fiber because of the insecurity in the area. Which also means that the major city, the major port city of Kismayo is not connected by fiber. And also these two border crossings here are currently pretty much useless. So from Kenya, two companies, one is here in the north at Mandera, the Kenyan National Fiber Backbone Infrastructure, NOFBI, a government-funded initiative, has rolled out fiber to the right up to the border at Mandera, and a private sector company, Liquid Telecom, has taken fiber to the border here in Liboy. But on the Somali side, the fiber is not there, so that bandwidth can't really be used effectively and transported to major population centers here in the south. And the disconnect between the north and south here has been the key problem with these outages. So with the easy cable outage in Mogadishu that I mentioned in 2017, there was no way this international capacity could be replaced. If we had a national backbone here connecting the north and the south, backup capacity could have been obtained from the submarine cable here in the north, the G2A cable, via the terrestrial link, and Mogadishu could have continued to be served. But that is just not the case if you don't have that terrestrial backbone. So that's why it's so important to complete the terrestrial backbone network, so the different international landing stations are interconnected and can back each other up. As I said, some relief will come when these additional submarine cables land. So actually the next cable that will go live, the DARE cable, will do this. It will connect Bosaso and Mogadishu via an undersea fiber route instead of a terrestrial route. So then we have that connection, north-south connection, and that backup, those backup options to reduce the impact of these outages. And also they'll bring competition to these markets. So in both major markets, Mogadishu, the easy cable is currently the only international cable serving that market. So it's basically a monopoly situation. And because the regulatory institutions are weak, that pretty much leaves the operator of that cable to do what they want in terms of pricing and so on. Same in Bosaso, the G2A cable is the only cable serving that local regional market in the north. These two local markets are not interconnected, so these two cables cannot compete in these local markets with each other. That will change when these additional submarine cables will land. Then we have, they'll be operated by different entities, and then we'll have real competition on this wholesale level. So that'll be a major improvement in two ways, as mentioned here on this slide. In the meantime, I'll quickly show you this slide as well. While we don't have a complete terrestrial fiber backbone domestically in the country, we do have microwave radio links connecting the different cities, more cities than are connected by fiber. So you can see here the north and south are connected by microwave radio links, but the problem is microwave radio links cannot provide the same capacity that a fiber optic cable can. The capacity is quite limited. So it's not a full substitute to really effectively distribute that massive fiber optic international capacity from the submarine cables. To distribute it around the country, you really need a fiber optic backbone network in the country. Microwave radio links are not enough for that. And in those places in the country where there's none of this, no fiber and no microwave, VSAT, of course, satellite is the only option to connect internationally out of the country. And capacity there is also limited, even more limited, and it's very expensive bandwidth. On to the third layer of CII, critical information infrastructure, the local access layer. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the mobile networks are the ones that absorb the bulk of the local connectivity, the local access. The fixed access sector is quite underdeveloped. This is the part here where the topic of data availability comes in. So again, in this study, in 2020, we experienced exactly the same as what we had experienced 4 years earlier in 2016. And actually others who have tried to conduct infrastructure studies in Somalia as well have found encountered the same problem. There's just no information available on mobile network coverage. So none of the Somali MNOs, mobile network operators, have ever published a coverage map. And neither have they provided coverage information to the regulator, the NCA, or to an independent study like ours. None of that has ever happened. Article 16 of the Communications Act actually obliges them to provide information to the regulator if the regulator can ask for information that it considers vital to performing its obligations. And normally in every other country, coverage information of the different mobile networks is such information. It's important for the regulator and others to know what the extent of the coverage is, to see whether everyone in the country is served, including rural areas where perhaps funding is needed to improve coverage, and so on. So why is this so? We've never received a direct answer to that. We can only speculate why the industry is so reluctant to talk about its network coverage, because normally it's a competitive advantage to show your coverage map if you're an operator, to show that your network has better coverage than your competitor. It's normally a competitive advantage, and you'll see operators elsewhere happily publish these coverage maps on their websites and advertise their network coverage. One possible explanation could be that that the coverage is actually not so great in Somalia, that perhaps the operators have cherry-picked up to now and focused on the lucrative urban areas for now, and haven't rolled out a lot of coverage in rural areas, at least as far as the higher level technologies like 3G and 4G, the faster data technologies are concerned. And I'll talk a little bit about that, what we know about that, as little as it is. So that's one possible explanation, because these are normally in other countries, these are often license conditions. Certain coverage obligations are part of the license of an operator, and if the operator fails to roll out that degree of coverage in a certain time frame, there can be penalties, or even in extreme cases revocations of licenses. And perhaps that could be part of the reason why the operators don't like to talk about their network coverage. Another one possibly could be, you're probably all aware that there have been threats by Al-Shabaab against network operators not to provide especially 3G, 4G internet services. And that could be part of the reason as well. And that would, of course, be a legitimate concern if this affects this would affect the safe operation of an operator, that they might hesitate to publish this information. Even though one has to say, I mean, those guys, the Al-Shabaabs, even without a published coverage map, they can see where the towers are, and they could do what they want to do with them, which has happened, as you all know, that the towers have been targeted and attacked. So I don't know if publishing a coverage map would really make a difference in that regard. But be that as it may, there is no official information about the extent of mobile network coverage in Somalia, and it would really be quite important to know more about that. Because, as I said, the mobile networks provide such an important function as the dominant access method for not only internet, but also voice services and mobile money services, that the entire economy, the entire country relies so heavily upon. It would be important to know more about this. What is known, some of you may have looked for this information and found there are some coverage maps on the internet, but they don't represent the real situation at all. For example, I've put two examples up here. On the left, you see if you go to the GMSA website, the GSM Association, that is actually all it shows for the entire country, for the Hormuz network, the biggest network in the country. This is all it shows, that coverage around Mogadishu, 2G, 3G, and 4G coverage represented by the different colors. That's all. If you zoom out on this map on the GSMA website, there's no other coverage shown in the entire country. And we know for a fact that's not accurate. There is a lot more coverage throughout the country. Yeah, so this information is either completely outdated or just was never provided completely in the first place. It's unusable. On the right, you see the coverage, the 4G coverage of the Hormuz network shown on the Cell Mapper website. Now, I should explain this a little bit. Cell Mapper is a crowdsourced way of generating coverage maps. So it's an app that anyone can download. I've got it on my phone. Anyone can download this app and have it run in the background on his phone, his or her phone, and allow it to upload information about the network that you're on with your phone. And if enough people do that in a country, you will end up with a crowdsourced coverage map showing 2G, 3G, or 4G coverage in all the different locations. Now, as we can see here, this map is also pretty empty. Not many people in Somalia have done this. In fact, it looks like, as you can see, there's no 4G coverage in Mogadishu, where we know there is 4G coverage, and in some other major cities. So nobody in Mogadishu has ever installed this app and used it. But for some strange reason, some person up there in near Beledweyne, maybe an NGO worker, maybe a government employee, discovered this app, installed it, and has run it, and it's showing on this public website that there is 4G coverage there in that part of Somalia. So this map on the right doesn't mean that's all it is. We know there is more 4G coverage in the country and on the Hormuz network as well. It's just that not enough people have done this to fill this map. It's a crowdsourced map. But that's actually an opportunity to maybe learn more about mobile coverage. I'll conclude my presentation with the proposal for that. Let me go through the rest of the slides quickly. This is, so our study, in the absence of information, absence of official information from the operators or other sources, our study again was based, in terms of mobile network coverage, was based largely on anecdotal evidence. And the anecdotal evidence for quite a number of years in terms of 2G coverage has been that the operators have, for quite a number of years now, always said, when we've asked them about the network coverage, the answer has been, yes, we have nationwide coverage. And anecdotal evidence seems to support that statement. Various sources have told us that indeed, at least basic 2G coverage, so GSM coverage, is indeed available. Is pretty widespread in the country, including smaller towns and even villages and rural areas. That seems to be the case. We don't know for sure, it's anecdotal evidence, but various sources have said that to us. In terms of 4G, you know, from my own experience, having traveled to Mogadishu and Hargeisa, I know that already a few years ago, it seemed like 4G coverage was initially only available in those two major cities, Mogadishu and Hargeisa. But in the meantime, it seems, again, anecdotal evidence only, but several various sources have reported this to us, that in the meantime, 4G coverage has spread to other major cities, including Bosaso, Garowe, Calcayo, Baidoa, and Kismayo. 3G, so in between 2G and 4G, 3G, it actually, the Cell Mapper website does reveal that 3G may already have reached more smaller towns as well. What you see here on this map is several 3G base stations. You can filter on the Cell Mapper website what you want to see, 2G, 3G, or 4G. If you filter for 3G, you see here that these are all smaller towns, really quite small towns near Dusamreb. That's Dusamreb here on the right-hand side of the map. So these are smaller towns. I think it's Garisale. I think Mohammed, we talked about it. I think it's Garisale and some other towns in that area, but relatively small towns that seem to have 3G coverage. Somebody has been out there with the app installed on their phone, and it's been uploaded to the website, and we can see there is 3G coverage there. Again, if we zoomed out of this map on the live website, this is pretty much all it's showing. So again, not enough people have done this throughout the country in all other parts of the country. So we don't have a complete map. We just have some local snapshots where somebody just for one reason or another ended up using this app for a little bit. So as I said, it would be really important to learn more about the degree of mobile coverage in the country. Even 2G coverage, because basic mobile money services, SMS-based mobile money services, rely on that. So I mean, it would be great if we do indeed, if that was correct, the information, the anecdotal evidence we've received that 2G coverage is already very widespread in the country. That would at least support basic voice services and basic mobile money services, even to rural populations. 3G and 4G, probably more limited still from the information we have. But now especially 4G is so important to deliver more advanced data services that 2G and even 3G cannot deliver, you know, because of the limitations in terms of speed and bandwidth. So especially 4G is, of course, important for a number of advanced data services. And it's also important to know, you know, where the coverage gaps are, how extensive the coverage is, how extensive the gaps are, to start talking about innovative solutions. For example, as part of this project, we talked to Google about their project Loon, which is, many of you will have heard about this. This is, these are stratospheric balloons that they launch into the stratosphere, which are, they can direct them around the world, any part on the, anywhere on the planet, to deliver 4G LTE coverage directly to the ground. These days, the model is they partner with a local MNO, a mobile network operator on the ground, and basically these balloons become part of that local operator's network. They're basically flying base stations that are able to very quickly fill substantial coverage gaps that remain on the ground with the terrestrial infrastructure. But someone like Google, of course, also needs this information. They would need to know what coverage does exist on the ground, how big are the gaps? Is there an opportunity there for us to fill these gaps with this technology, for example? So really, for so many reasons, it would be really important to finally know more about mobile network coverage in Somalia. And I'm actually therefore proposing a project, and I invite you all to join me in that effort to try and generate a crowdsourced coverage map of Somalia. I'm showing you here what this can look like on Cell Mapper, and there's another app similar called NPerf. And this is on the left, you have this is a part of Sydney that I live in. And that's what one of these crowdsourced coverage maps can look like if enough people participate. And as you can see, this here is a main road, for example. So a lot of people have run the app driving along that main road. Of course, there is coverage in these suburban side streets as well, here and everywhere. It's just, again, that nobody has been out there with the app running in these smaller suburban streets. But it already delivers a good enough picture. I mean, what we would want in the first step for Somalia, that we can see which little towns and suburbs have base stations here and have coverage. So this town of Newport and Bilgola, where I live, and Avalon, we can see there's coverage, there's base stations in all these towns, of course, because this is a suburban area. And you can see even here in the national park, this is a road, a more isolated road, there's coverage there. And for the whole country, if you look on the right, the other app, NPerf, that kind of map you get over time. If you have enough people participating and uploading this data, you end up with a more or less complete coverage map of the entire country. You can filter by 2G, 3G, 4G, and so on. There are gaps in this as well. There's some, we know for a fact that there is coverage here on these, of course, Australia does have many very remote and isolated areas where there really is no coverage, but there are some interstate roads here, for example, and also here going out west, where we know there is coverage. It's, again, just nobody has been out there with this app. But it's a good enough map, at least in these more densely populated areas, to tell us at least which towns have coverage and which ones don't. So if we can mobilize a group of people that is large enough and spread out across the country, Somalia, enough, and make them run this app for a while, Cell Mapper or NPerf, we would end up knowing what the mobile network coverage in Somalia is, 2G, 3G, 4G, before very long. And I invite you all to brainstorm with me, how could this be done? I've been thinking possibly government staff, if we go down to state and local government, perhaps, there are government employees in all parts of the country, including smaller towns and even villages, that maybe we can mobilize to get involved and run this app on their phones for a while. Hopefully they'll be able to travel around their local area safely. But even if they don't, because there's a lot of areas in Somalia where it's not safe to travel, but we wouldn't even have to ask them to travel out of town a lot and travel each and every road to measure the network coverage, as long as we know which cities and which towns have coverage. That would give us a good enough idea as a first step. And then we can just assume that some coverage on roads outside of these towns exists as well. But we wouldn't have to go that far and drive each and every road. So just testing around cities and towns would be sufficient as a first step. Perhaps NGO staff, let's brainstorm on that. How can we implement this? we need to mobilize again, a group of people that is large enough and distributed, spread out across the entire country to do this. And all we would have to do is perhaps provide some smartphones if they don't already exist. If these people don't already have them, a little bit of training, how to use the app, and then it could be done. So if any of you have ideas in terms of staffing, how this could be implemented, and also in terms of funding, please let me know. I'll be very happy to cooperate with any of you, any of your institutions that you work with. That perhaps we can set up a project like this, and finally find out about this third important layer of infrastructure in Somalia as well. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Well, thanks, Peter. That was very informative and educational. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure all the audience will probably agree with me. What I would like to do now is we've got